Find out the secret fat-burning ingredient in Nick Walker's contest prep for the New York Pro after this.
I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your weekly question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever is on your mind, be it bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, diet, training, supplementation, whatever it is, IABB Pros, competitions. Of course, we are now in the thick of the contest calendar. The Dubai Pro and the China Pro on the same weekend in a week and a half. So a big show. We're going to get another chance to see Behrooz Tabani and perhaps a couple of other big names. There are some rumors floating around right now. We'll see if any of these big names confirm, but nonetheless, a lot of reasons for excitement. So again, whatever's on your mind, any question that you have, bodybuilding or otherwise, it is all on the table as we go straight into the questions. The first two questions on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. There is a shortage of Tren Ace and Masteron Pro in my country. I'm not sure, he doesn't specify which country. I'm only able to get Tren enanthate and Masteron enanthate. Can I use the long esters for my contest prep?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. The Trenbolone is Trenbolone. You're going to get the same effects. The short-acting esters like the tren acetate just hit you a little faster. And they also cause more side effects too in people. Back when I was competing in the early 90s, there was no tren acetate. We were using Parabone, which was tren, hex, which was like a long-acting Trenbolone, and it worked great, So I think for a lot of people that do have the side effects of not being able to sleep, or it affects their appetite and digestion, maybe gives them hiccups. This is very common with tren acetate. You're better off going with the long-acting tren. Now, he didn't mention which country there's a lack of tren acetate in, but I'm sure there's someone out there right now saying, maybe I should move into that country and start producing some of them. But seriously, yeah, the long-acting esters are fine.
Second question, again, these first two from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Do you still rotate some clients between the protein fat diet and the protein veggie diet? And I guess I'll add to that, when would you do that if you do?
Most women that I work with, I have on a ketogenic diet, except the ones that have like crazy genetic freaky metabolisms, then I can feed them carbs. Or some women they absolutely just don't do well on protein fats, and they do better on a little bit of carbs. But most women can't eat carbs at all. So I do protein fat alternated with protein vegetables, which is basically, a certain serving of protein rather than with a serving of fat, like, nuts or avocados or macadamia oil. I'll give them a vegetable like asparagus, spinach, green beans, a very low glycemic vegetable. And I do that because it kind of it puts them in a really big deficit on those days, calorically speaking, and they usually burn a lot of fat on those days. And a lot of times when you first give them those days, they actually like them better because vegetables take up more volume in your stomach. Unfortunately, they have virtually no calories, or they're very low, so they don't really sustain you very well. But if you do 2 days of protein and fat, which is my typical ketogenic diet, and then you drop it to a day of protein and vegetables, they're so low that they'll, like I said, usually you see a good fat loss on those days, and they deplete real well. And then the next day you put them back on fats, which gives them a little more calories because fats are higher in calories than say vegetables would be. And that kind of like shocks their body. So I do that with women. Very rarely do I do it with men, except guys that are like, we're down to 2 weeks left and they're still just not where I need them to be. And then I might do something extreme like that. I know Kevin Levrone used to like to do protein vegetables, before a show. He would sometimes do it for 6 weeks straight, but he's a genetic freak. Most guys would wither away on that, and their metabolisms actually might slow down because of that. So I don't go there unless I need it. It is a tool I have in my tool shed to use if necessary, but I like to get guys in shape, prior to getting down to that 2 week mark. Now, some guys come to me at 2-3 weeks out and they say, I'm not making good progress with my coach. Can I hire you the last 3 weeks? And I have my work cut out for me. And in cases like that, I probably would do that, but that's an extreme measure. Now, these 2 questions were from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. If you guys haven't subscribed, you can download it from your Android store, your iTunes store. It is, you basically get Dave Palumbo in your back pocket as your coach, and it's $29 a month. You get all my writings, all my videos in one organized place. I have all my protocols, drug, off-season, pre-contest, beginner, advanced, women, men, detoxifications in there. I have all my diets, off-season, pre-contest, rotation diets. It's a really good resource. It's like a library of a lot of great information, and it's constantly being updated because I do a Q&A in an open forum for every app member. So you can ask any question you want, and it's answered in an open forum so everyone sees everyone's questions and answers. Great learning experience, and we do a Q&A video just like this Ask Dave, except it's an extra one every single week for the app members only. And so it's a great learning resource. We have a ton of members. Thank you for your support. Tell your friends about it. It's a really good resource. If you're looking to buy a gift for someone, it's a great gift. If they're a bodybuilder, I'm sure they'll greatly appreciate it.
Before we go to the rest of the questions from our social media platforms, our friends at Titan Medical Center have a weekly special, the Triton Trifecta package, the Hercules Potion, Titan Complete, and your ECA stock. If you want to tell the audience a little bit more about this weekly special from Titan Medical Center.
Yeah, they're giving a huge discount on all these stacks. I like the, if you can't get clenbuterol, which is a great fat burner, obviously not legal, but if you want to order something legal, the ECA stack, which is the ephedra caffeine aspirin stack, they sell that legally. You can get that prescribed. It works really well. A lot of people like it. They like that little boost from the ephedra. You can get that from TitanMedicalCenter.com. I know a lot of people think it's not unavailable. You can't get that drug anywhere anymore. No, you can still get it by prescription. I don't think they're saying no consult required, right? You can just call there and order it. So that's great. So you don't have to do a consult with their doctors. You don't have to do blood work. You just call in, say you want to order it, and you can order that. And so they're having a huge discount on that. So if you guys don't have access to clenbuterol and you want something that's going to boost your metabolism a little bit, give them a shot. Plus all those other potions are also greatly discounted this week only. TitanMedicalCenter.com.
So again, if you mention Titan Medical, go to TitanMedicalCenter.com or give them a call. You pull up their phone number, 727-389-3220. Again, this is all available at TitanMedicalCenter.com. Mention RxMuscle, Dave Palumbo, and they will hook you up. Let's go to the rest of the questions. There was a reel. I'm just trying to pull it up real quick. It's from Charlie Caruso. I'll give him a shout out. Let me pull up here we go. So he pulled a clip from a recent podcast where Nick Walker talks about retatrutide. Now, we've gotten quite a lot of questions on retatrutide over the last few weeks. Right. And then I guess Nick Walker opens up about using it for his prep. Let's take a listen.
Yeah. Taking retatrutide. On a recent podcast, Nick Walker did say for this bodybuilding prep leading up to the Pittsburgh Pro and the New York Pro show, he did use the peptide known as retatrutide as an appetite suppressant, and he said that it worked amazing for him.
And Kyle had me use that retatrutide, and it worked tremendously.
The great thing about this is that it burned fat very well for him, so much so that Nick didn't need to take a lot of harder compounds to lose fat during this prep. Now, if you don't know what Reta is, it's a triple hormone receptor agonist targeting GLP-1. It's primarily aimed at treating obesity and has shown promise in weight loss and diabetes management. It's interesting hearing a big-time bodybuilder like Nick talk about this, especially at such a high remark. This will be something that 100% a lot of guys start implementing, and I know many already have. I believe this will be a peptide that potentially if you don't use it, you're just going to get left behind. And Nick has seemingly transitioned right into the Mr. Olympia prep 18 weeks out. And I would put a lot of money on it that Retta is a big reason for that. This new peptide will be utilized a ton, and not only in bodybuilding. Open bodybuilders are now taking retatrutide. On a recent
This is, yeah.
So let me cancel out of that.
Yeah.
But again, going to his point that not only, again, reacting to Nick Walker using it, but to his assertion that he can see this being a game changer, that a lot more bodybuilders will use retatrutide. What do you say to that?
Well, there are a lot of bodybuilders already, especially the women, are using Mounjaro, which is it's a GLP-1 agonist. It's also a GIP agonist. Retatrutide just adds another. It actually adds a glucagon agonist to it, which is kind of weird because glucagon, mobilizes blood into the bloodstream and raises blood sugar, which kind of the other aspect of the GLP-1 agonist kind of lowers blood sugar. So it's kind of weird that's added to it. I'm not really a huge fan of the retatrutide. I think the Mounjaro is better for bodybuilders, believe it or not, because I don't really want blood sugar being raised with the glucagon antagonism or agonism, I should say, of the retatrutide. But regardless, I don't know why Nick used it. The guy's gotten in shape very easily for every show I've ever seen him in. I think that it's one of these things where these gurus just like to throw everything in the kitchen sink in. There's no way he's using less of anything else. They're adding it on top of everything. That's the way it goes in this industry. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if everything else works perfectly, why would you take something out if you're adding something else in that's ostensibly going to burn more fat? What it did for him was it took the edge off his hunger. The reason why these GLP-1 agonists take the edge off your hunger is it slows the digestive tract. So the food has a certain pace that it goes through the digestive tract, right? The more fats in your meals, the slower it goes, which is why a lot of times people like my protein and fat diet, because it sustains, gives you more sustenance and doesn't make you as hungry as quickly, whereas carbs go through faster. So you tend to be hungrier after a meal. But the retatrutide slows that transit. The problem is you can get really constipated, especially in bodybuilders like Nick, who are probably eating an enormous amount of food, even on a contest diet. So you have to use a fiber supplement. I don't mind if everyone in the whole world uses retatrutide. I will sell a ton of Fiberlize because of that. Because if you don't take Fiberlize while you're taking those things, you're not going to go to the bathroom, and you're going to get backed up. And in a lot of cases, people wind up in the hospital because they have, fecal retention, and it gets hard and then they can't poop. So that's something that you have to be careful of, especially as bodybuilders. We don't want to get distended, abdomens because of that. So you definitely want to take, something like Fiberlize or a potent fiber supplement. I think that we're the best on the market at this point. I'm pretty confident in saying that. So I don't care if people use it, but I don't think that everyone needs to use it. It's not one of these drugs that you just throw in there on top of everything. It's great for people who are cheaters on their diet, who have trouble sticking to a diet. But if you don't need it, in other words, if you're a militant dieter already and you don't cheat on your diet, I don't think there's any benefit to adding it. I think that all you can get is side effects. You're not getting any benefit. People say, have you tried it? I'm like, why? I have no zero body fat on my body. Why would I even take this? Why would I take this stuff? Just because everyone else is taking it? So it's not like everyone should take this. There's a certain population of people that do really well at it. I have women that have trouble losing weight. They're snackers. They have eating disorders. They take this and it takes that urge away to eat between meals. It doesn't mean you shouldn't eat, okay? Because a lot of people make the mistake and think that this drug causes muscle loss. It does not. What causes muscle loss is not eating. If you miss meals. So in other words, if you're eating 6 times a day as a bodybuilder and you start taking retatrutide and then you stop, you only eat 4 meals a day and you're losing weight, you're probably losing muscle too. So don't cut out your meals. Just don't snack in between meals. As long as you keep your food intake at what it should be, in other words, your protein intake at a certain amount at a certain time interval every, all throughout the day, you're only going to lose fat. When you start missing meals, that's when you start losing muscle, and you don't want that. It's funny because they're actually, I'm going to do a video on this, a separate video on this. They have it's one of these new myostatin inhibitors out there. There's 2 new drugs, and they're doing studies with complexing the myostatin inhibitor, which inhibits myostatin, which ostensibly unlocks muscle growth, with like Ozempic or with like Mounjaro. So they're putting them together and they're saying, oh, if you take these together, you won't lose muscle. which is really ironic, because the reason they're still not acknowledging that the fact that the people are losing muscle on these GLP-1 agonists is because they're not eating. It has nothing to do with the fact that the drug is causing muscle loss. The drug does not cause muscle loss. Not eating causes muscle loss. Not eating enough protein during the day causes muscle loss. Imagine if you take a drug and you don't eat all day and you start losing weight. You're going to lose equal muscle and fat. And maybe that's the goal. Maybe you don't care if, some of these Hollywood people, they're just fat slobs. They don't give a shit, how they lose the weight. They'll lose muscle, they'll lose fat. They just want to see the scale go down. But for bodybuilders, performance enhanced athletes who are looking to look their best on stage, you cannot skip meals. You must take a fiber supplement with this drug. And once again, the drug is not for everyone. If you don't need it, don't use it.
Is this the part, Dave, where we drop a promo code below in the comment section?
That's right. Yeah.
Anyway, go to speedsnutrition.com. Next question. Is a question about creatine. Is supplementing with creatine a bad idea if you have high creatinine levels? I currently only take a post-workout. I've had kidney failure in the past, just as a recovery aid 3 times a week. So the question is, creatine with high creatinine levels, is that a bad idea?
Yeah, I'd say it's a bad idea. If I had high creatinine, I would not take creatine because it's putting stress on the kidneys to have to break the stuff down into creatinine, and it's probably not a good idea. Now, some people run slightly high creatinine levels because of the fact that they're eating a high protein diet, they're training really hard. But if they test their cystatin C levels, which is really the premier indicator of kidney health, and those are normal, then there's nothing to worry about. The problem is that when cystatin C starts, dropping a little bit or going too high, I should say, I would not take creatinine. I would not take a creatine supplement. But if you're just running a little on the higher side of creatinine, meaning that, there's a range from I think it's 0.8 to 1.35 or something like that. And men, there's a higher value for women. I think 1.25 is normal. If you're running 1.35 as a bodybuilder, that's really not high. It's the high normal, but it's really not high because I expect to see higher levels from bodybuilders. We eat a ton of protein. We work out hard, which means we break down muscle, which goes into the bloodstream and has to be deaminated by the kidneys. So that's kind of normal. It's when you start seeing those creatinines of 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, that's too high already. Now you want to definitely avoid creatine supplementation. And this guy has a history of kidney failure or kidney issues, so probably I wouldn't push the envelope.
Question about, we do get a lot of questions lately about peptides and the various applications of peptides. This one along the lines of depression and anxiety. Are you familiar with the peptides? And I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, selank and semax, SEMAX. I believe they're to help with mental health, anxiety, brain fog, depression, etc. It could be quite helpful for bodybuilders, as we all seem to have a few mental issues. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I've heard of these peptides. I've theoretically heard of what they do. I don't know anyone that's actually gotten any success from it or relief from it or have said, holy mackerel, this changed my life. So remember, a lot of these peptides are being studied in mice models. They're being studied in labs. And so theoretically, they're isolating these things from the brain. So they're these things should theoretically do this, but do they really do this in humans? When you test them on mice for a week and you get a result, does that necessarily translate to a human? And most of the time it doesn't. And I always worry about just shotgunning every peptide known to man into your body, hoping that maybe some of them will work, because who knows if they interact with each other? Who knows if they mess up cascades of other, stuff that's going on in your body. So I don't like the whole polypharmacy thing because we just don't know how these peptides all interact with each other. So what I recommend doing is using the ones that we know work, and the ones that are kind of on the fence that really we're not getting good reports on, or we're not getting any consistent reports on, I would avoid those until they're proven otherwise. We know that BPC 157, TB 500 are good healing peptides. We know they work. We know IGF-1 works. We know growth hormone works. We know insulin works. Those are all peptide hormones, right? We know melanotan makes you darker. Okay, these are proven GHRPs, the growth hormone releasing peptides work. We know these work, so there's no fear at using those, and we know what the results are. But these more esoteric ones that we really have not a lot of practical empirical information on, I would just avoid them. I just don't think it's worth it.
Question about wacky pre-contest rituals. This is from our friend Raw Muscle Glutes. Weirdest or wackiest pre-contest ritual or superstition that you ever heard or seen a bodybuilder do?
I should write these things down because I forget. There was back in my day, there would be guys that stunk to high heaven because they hadn't taken a shower for a week backstage because they thought that if they bathed in water, it would cause water retention. There were guys that wouldn't brush their teeth the morning of the show, and their breath stunk because they thought the sodium fluoride in the toothpaste was going to make them hold water. I mean, stuff as ridiculous as that. I mean, those are probably the two most disgusting because I'm a smell guy. So like when I smell someone's breath that stinks or their body odor that stinks, it drives me nuts. But I've seen some kooky stuff that people have done, like protocols, like taking 150 units of insulin, the night before and eating thousands of grams of carbs. I mean, just wacky shit, The diuretic protocols that some of these people take are insane as well. But as far as just weird shit, those are probably the two things that come to mind from my competitive years sitting backstage. And it's funny. It's always the guys that do those weird things that don't even look that good. In other words, rather than diet hard and get in the best shape of your life, they're worried about brushing their teeth with sodium fluoride that they're going to hold water. Meanwhile, the guy is 3-4 weeks out from being in contest shape, and he's on stage and he's worried about toothpaste, so that's par for the course. The guys that look the best don't do crazy shit. That's really the bottom line. Ask any guy that consistently looks good at every show. There's no craziness in their routine. Matter of fact, it's probably very boring, their routine. They do the same thing every single day. And that's what yields good results.
Question about optimal testosterone. I respond well to testosterone and can get my levels to 5,000 by taking 750 mg per week. And with taking 1,000 mg per week, it was up to 7,500. In your opinion, what is the optimal testosterone level to be at if I can get my levels that high?
Yeah, I don't know what the total testosterone that on blood work is in terms of how you can relate that to results in the gym. But I do know that the sweet spot of injecting testosterone seems to be 1,000 milligrams a week. I mean, that was, in my experience, what worked the most magic. It had the least side effects with the most results. Once I went over 1,000 milligrams a week and I went to 1,200, I felt I felt a lot more bloaty, and I felt a little more nauseous, almost like a flu-like feeling. And I didn't notice any more muscle gains. So I would cut back and I would do the 1,000 milligrams per week. If I went a little less than 1,000 milligrams a week, I didn't grow as much, and the side effects were no different. So that was my sweet spot. Other people might have a slightly higher sweet spot or a slightly lower sweet spot. I know guys that do well on 800 milligrams a week, and they're fine, and they like it. And if they go to 1,000, they kind of feel crappy. So you kind of have to. There's a range, but I think 1,000 on average it tends to be the ideal amount of testosterone per week. We can't hear you, Sid.
This silly mute button. Would you recommend running an all-season cycle all the way through contest prep and then coming off after contest, or is there a benefit from running an off-season cycle and then coming off for 8 weeks before starting the contest prep cycle again?
Yeah, I don't like coming off before, because if you're at a nice peak, let's say you get up to 300 pounds, just for argument's sake, in the off season, and you're feeling good, you're strong as can be, you're big, you might be a little bloaty, but that's fine. And then you got 16, now you go into start contest prep. I would go right into the contest prep at this point. Why would you want to go backwards and then have to try to go up again? So get through the contest prep, be your best, hold as much size as possible, and then after the prep, definitely come off and give yourself 8 to 10 weeks off the drugs. So you don't want to go up and then down and then go up again. It's ridiculous, at that point. So I would recommend staying on off season, pre-con, unless you're doing a 2-year off season. That's a different story. But if you're doing from January to April or May off season, and then you're going to do a 16-week or 18-week, pre-contest to compete in the fall, I think that's perfect. Go continuous.
We do get this question very often, but I think it is one that applies to really the whole gamut of bodybuilders, and that is dealing with hunger during a diet when you're pre-contest. Your best tips to dealing with hunger and the craziness that goes with that when you're dieting.
I've done everything from drinking 2 liters of Diet Coke and diet sodas, coffee was a tremendous help for me. I would do coffee with maybe some Splenda or stevia in it, black. But when you're dieting, it tastes like chocolate milk, to me. I've done a lot of times I'll leave the house. In other words, if I'm starting to get crazy and I'm super hungry and I know I got an hour and a half to my next meal and I can't rest or take a nap or what I used to do is try to clean things. I would clean out a closet, just to pass the time. If it got to that point where I was just going crazy, I just got out of the house. Do not stay in the house when you're freaking starved. And, everyone has a list of options. It's almost like a menu in your head of what to do when you feel like you're starving, right? In some people's drop-down menu, cheating is an option. In my menu, my drop-down menu, there's never an option. So I was never going to sit there and put extra food in my mouth just because I was hungry. So it didn't matter. There were plenty of other options: do computer work, clean, go out, take a ride, go someplace, get on a phone call with someone to distract you. But it was never stick something in your mouth, eat an extra couple of raisins, eat some almonds. That was never an option for me cheating. It just wasn't. And that's because I did not ever want to have an excuse when I got on stage that I wasn't my absolute best. So that's my suggestion. If you are just one of these people that cannot control themselves and you're going to cheat because you don't have that willpower, you're probably a very good candidate, hearkening back to our earlier question, of doing a GLP-1 agonist like an Ozempic or Mounjaro or retatrutide, because that will curb your appetite between meals. But for anyone who's, getting into this sport and wants to bodybuild and wants to compete for the next 10 years, you better learn how to suffer, because that's required. It's not fun between meals when you get down to very low body fat. And if you're not a person who can endure that suffering, you're in the wrong sport, because it doesn't get any easier. Okay. It gets worse, if anything, because the longer you do it, you're like, oh my God, I got to do it again. It's part of the whole sport. The good thing is that after the show's over, you can eat whatever you want. So it's deferred gratification. There's a lot of people out there that don't know how to defer gratification. They want instantaneous gratification all the time. And if you're one of those guys, bad option to be a bodybuilder.
Not sure if we're getting trolled or if you've actually seen people use this backstage. Again, we talked about wacky, superstitious things that people do before stepping on stage. Pam cooking spray. Do you recommend spraying Pam cooking spray in your body before going on stage? Is that a thing, or are we being trolled?
Yeah, no, that was backstage. A lot of times, they have people who oil you up backstage. A lot of times they have at least when I was competing, they had a ton of Pam back there, and that's what they used as oil. Yeah. They would just spray, because it's sprayed on more evenly. I used to use some of the stuff from Pro-Tan. I think it was called Muscle Juice, and there was a bunch of other tanning oils that they would put on that actually smelled really good. Pam doesn't have a smell, but I remember back in the day. Nowadays, a lot of the spray tanning people have a special oil that goes, or at least they say it's special, that goes with the specific type of tan that you have. So the good thing is that they have people backstage and they're oiling you up. Whereas when I competed, you had to find someone, another guy there who's backstage, and you'd oil his back, he'd oil your back, and you'd do the rest of it yourself. But at the national level, they always seem to have people back there. But nowadays, I see there's always people backstage oiling people up, which is really kind of cool to have that. This way, at least your back is done properly. You're not too shiny. You're not too dull. When I go backstage now at these shows, because I've been going to a lot more shows recently this past year, I'm usually walking around, and if I see someone who's too oily, I'll tell them, I'll pat them down with a towel. If I think they're not oily, I'll say, hey, go over there and get some more oil on your back. And everyone's very appreciative, because when you're backstage, you're really nervous. And a lot of times these guys are doing, or women are doing their first show and they don't know any better. So to have someone like myself, or people who know what they're doing back there, advising them how to properly oil, that's a really cool thing to have. But yeah, they used to use PAM. I don't see too much PAM. I think, like I said, I think the companies like Liquid Sunrays or Protan have their own oils that they use now.
I guess second part to that question, was there any flavor that you saw backstage or that you would recommend of PAM cooking or spray, whatever? No,
it was usually very generic. But like I said, I always loved the Protan. I got to give a shout out to Stacy, who owns the Protan. He's an awesome guy. He's been doing it for many, many years, over 30 years. He had some amazing smelling oils back there that I used to love. As a matter of fact, when I would go into a bodybuilding, or I'd go into like an auditorium, gymnasium, or wherever they were holding the bodybuilding shows back in the 90s, there was always a smell that I smelled, and it just said, there's a bodybuilding show here to me. And it's still that way nowadays. It's not as strong, but I think it was because of his products that had that special smell. A lot of times I don't see it used much anymore. It's called hot stuff spray. It was like a vasodilator. It would dilate your veins on your body. And the problem is it made you a little bit red sometimes, but I would get crazy. I have a lot of veins already. And that was always being used in the 90s. And that smell, it had such a strong smell, that stuff, that it permeated the air of the whole arena, or the whole gym, or the whole whatever school it was being held in. And it was just a very distinctive smell. I don't smell that anymore, but there is definitely, when you walk backstage, you can smell there's a bodybuilding show here.
Wanted to take home. I'm not sure if I asked this about a week and a half ago. It's about tamoxifen and milk thistle. Did we ask this question already, or?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so I'll ask it. Says that he's seen contradictions regarding tamoxifen and milk thistle. Does this refer to taking them at the same time?
I don't think it matters, to be honest with you, but tamoxifen is usually taken every 12 hours. So you take it in the morning when you get up. It's an estrogen receptor blocker, first of all, to those of you who don't know. Nolvadex, tamoxifen, same drug. You take 10 milligrams in the morning, and you take 10 milligrams 12 hours later. That's just how it's taken. It's a 12-hour pill. Whereas milk thistle, I usually take milk thistle with my with dinner. Milk thistle's designed to dilate the bile ducts that drain the liver into the gallbladder. What's the advantage of doing that? Well, the liver, we know, detoxifies all the drugs in your body and all the poisons and toxins and stuff like that. And then it drains it into the gallbladder. Okay. And then the gallbladder releases bile when you eat fats, and that goes into the digestive tract, and then you poop it out. Right. So if you can dilate those bile ducts more, it gives it better flow to the liver, and it allows the liver to detoxify itself more efficiently. Whereas sometimes when the liver gets inflamed, because it's being asked to do a lot of detoxification, those bile ducts can get pinched off because there's too much inflammation, the liver's swelling, and then it can't drain itself, and it backs up, and the liver starts to can lay down scar tissue and stuff like that. By taking a milk thistle product, I actually sell a Bill Llewellyn's product called Liver Stable on DavePalumbo.com. It's a really good liver detoxifier. You take that, I usually take it at night before bed, or with my last meal, I should say, and it just opens those bile ducts up and just lets all that junk just flow out of that liver. And that's probably, if you're on a cycle especially, you should probably take that every day.
Did want to sneak one more in. What is the point of intra-workout carbs if it takes at least 24 hours for carbs to be stored as glycogen?
Yeah, I mean, if you're drinking like a drink that has some carbs, I wouldn't drink a super concentrated carb drink. But if you're drinking like some light carbs, even if you're drinking some coconut water, or you're doing some Gatorade, which Gatorade is kind of crappy. It's like high fructose corn syrup now. But whatever you're doing, if you're sipping some carbs while you're working out, those carbs are not going to get stored as glycogen while you're training. What you're ostensibly using is you're using those carbs. They're going into the bloodstream, and you're using them immediately for fuel. So you're not trying to you're not carbing up while you're working out. Now, Post-workout, if you do like a high molecular weight carb, with your whey isolate, kind of like my isolized and carbolized combination that I have everyone do, those carbs are going to get stored as glycogen and replenish the glycogen that you lost in the gym. Likewise, you're going to start protein synthesis recovery and from the workout with a fast, absorbing whey isolate. So that's the reason. But during your training, it doesn't pay to take in a very concentrated amount of calories because you're really not doing anything with it. But taking in some little bit of carbs, a little bit of amino acids, and maybe a way of like a product like my Amino Evolve, the essential aminos, those are going to be utilized immediately because they're going to be in the bloodstream. Once again, you're not going to be storing any amounts of glycogen. Matter of fact, your body doesn't really process much or do much digestion while you're training because all the blood supply has been diverted away from the GI tract and diverted to the muscles. So you need something that's in its simplest form, like some kind of glucose, or some kind of very simple sugar or amino acid that doesn't require digestion. That's just going to pop into the bloodstream, and that's the idea behind doing that. Now, in a contest, prep phase, I recommend only doing water, or a non-caloric drink. Off season, there's nothing wrong with sipping some aminos with some, with a small amount of carbs in there to give your body that extra little push it needs in the gym so that when you're training hard, you have a little extra in there. But once again, you're utilizing this stuff immediately. You're not storing it.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. A reminder, if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss this or any other shows on this channel. We have all new episodes of the After Hours podcast. And of course, Monday's episode of Heavy Muscle Radio with Dave Palumbo and Chris Aceto. We've been toying with the time format of the show. Dave, what is it looking like? Is it going to be a Monday staple going forward or for Heavy Muscle Radio?
Yeah. What I did was because I have my kids on the weekends, or at least every other weekend, I'm going to be doing Mondays for Heavy Muscle Radio on certain travel weekends. Or if we have something like Chris is not going to be able to do it Monday, or I won't be able to do it Monday, then we might pre-record on Sunday, or even do a live Sunday night if I don't have my kids that weekend. So I think that's on the table still, but we're going to try to mostly go to Mondays. Yeah.
All right, so there you have it. But again, both those shows right now on the channel. So again, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're not going to miss anything on this channel. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.